Hey everyone, it's Will, Gamer Dad, with another video for you. So in today's video, I would like to talk about Melissa. Yes, that Melissa. You know, the one that allows turn 1 or turn 2 kills. The one that allows you to mix and match your best DPS units together all in one team, regardless of element or weapon type. The one that just happens to have 10% AF bargain in the first turn, physical resist down, crit damage up, break status, and even wind and crystal 50% resist down. Yeah, that Melissa. One of the main reasons that I created this video is because I haven't seen such a divide in the Another Eden player base between Melissa and non-Melissa users since Tiramisu came out. Now for those who don't know, Tiramisu was a very highly recommended unit to do easy mob clears, and in some cases, easy boss clears since her damage isn't able to be resisted. She was one of the first units to ignore certain game mechanics since you didn't need to worry about team comp or boss resistance. You just use Summoner's Prayer, and with enough spirit, do 300k damage guaranteed. It's actually quite ironic. I've been thinking about this topic for some time, but only with recent threads on the AE subreddit discussing Melissa, that now is as good a time as ever to publish my thesis on her. And I hope you don't mind my rambling about Melissa. Let me know in the comments below what you think of my thoughts and opinions on Melissa. Anyways, back to Melissa. In today's meta for defeating tough endgame content such as optional super bosses, yeah, I'm looking at you, dual Hatchio Spirit Horrors. Melissa, along with the powerful ES Melina or other units as support, and the appropriate 2 DPS units, can conquer the vast majority of them relatively quickly, as in a turn 1 or turn 2 kill. Now, you may argue that this is a good thing, right? After all, it's always enjoyable and satisfying to beat all current content in the game. However, consider this. What if you don't have Melissa and attempt the same super bosses? It can be a slaughter fest, where you're the one getting slaughtered. You have to deal with 2 super bosses beating you down at the same time, and find a way to survive long enough to set up your team to do a large AF and pray that it is enough. And if the boss is an HP stopper, which most do nowadays, you have to hope to survive. Or there's a type DPS check like the land avatar fight, where you either end it immediately or it ends you. Nowadays, when someone says they beat the newest super boss, everyone's first question is the same. Is this a non-Melissa clear? Or the more common Melissa clear? Now those who have Melissa will argue that any unit in your roster is fair game to use. And this is true. But I would argue that unless you have great luck, it's not easy to pull Melissa since she's only been featured on one free banner. And so the vast majority of free-to-play users are missing this key unit to enable this powerful strategy, which can lead to some being disappointed or frustrated when taking on these fights. Of course, WFS makes it where a variety of teams can beat all content in the game. But many of these require top-tier Grasta or gear, which not all players have unless you've been playing a game for a while. So, what exactly is the point of this video? Well, firstly, I wanted to reassure everyone, especially newer players, that endgame content is exactly that, endgame. And if you can't beat it now, you can always wait until you've grinded out the Grasta or gear that you need, or pull a newer, more powerful unit to carry you to victory. But secondly, I wanted to point out that Melissa, like Tiramisu, allows you to ignore game mechanics to ensure victory. How does she do that, you may ask? Well, for starters, take her Flash Strike stance. Other than AS Hardy, which will come soon to Global, there is no other unit that can do this. All moves, regardless of weapon type, build and maintain the EF bar on your first turn. That means you have all the time in the world to land your buffs on your team, all your defensive debuffs on the enemy, and do tons and tons of damage. That's of course ignoring her break setup at the end of AF to allow the start of your second turn to kill it if you haven't already. Now I know some people have said that Melissa's only good for 1 or 2 turns, but that's exactly the point. You really only need her for 1 or 2 turns because the fight is pretty much over at that point if you haven't already killed it. To expand further on this point, when you use Melissa teams to fight super bosses, you don't have to worry about defense or healing. Your focus and the units you choose either support your DPS or are your top tier DPS units. And for most fights, this means that the boss doesn't even get a single turn to act. At the start of your second turn, all those setup moves you did in the first turn AF allows you to end the fight right there and then. And if you're a little bit short on DPS, don't worry. Just land Ruined Genocide and apply break status so that your DPS unit can do double damage, which is with its next hit. Now, I was talking to my kids about Melissa since only one of my children has her, and the other 2 don't. And the most shocking thing that came from this discussion was that if the boss doesn't get to act, is it really that different than fighting the bad baddies? At first, I was stunned at that comment, because it sounds ridiculous. But upon further review, they have a point. Because if a boss doesn't get to move, it doesn't matter what move rotation it has, since you'll never see them if you do the turn 1 or turn 2 kills. My friend, who also plays the game of course, made another interesting comment regarding Melissa versus non-Melissa players. They are not playing the same game. Now, you're probably asking, what do you mean by that? Well, non-Melissa strategies require planning out defensive strategies and also require a lot of mitigation and shielding to protect yourself against the boss's attacks. And that takes time to select the appropriate units, moves, and rotation, not to mention Grasta setup and so on and so forth. And of course, that's in addition to planning for the offensive side of the battle, where you need powerful DPS and support units. A lot of times that means that you're limited since you only have 6 units to put in the team. However, some are going to be dedicated to support and healing, or shielding, or debuffing, and they don't contribute much to your DPS, which may make the fight a lot longer and increase the chance of you dying either by making a single mistake or just by bad RNG. Now for Melissa strats, since you can ignore the defensive side of the game, your unit selection is much easier. As I mentioned earlier, it's usually Melissa, ES Melina or another powerful support unit like a Nakoko, and a main 1 or 2 DPS, especially those with high stats which can be enhanced by high light or shadow values. You don't have to worry about the rotation because the fight is over before you know it. All you have to do is worry about doing enough DPS to end it or push it to the HP stopper, and of course your Grasta setup to kill the boss after the HP stopper. Now imagine this. Imagine 2 different scenarios where a team is playing a hockey or soccer game. The first team is normal, with a goalie, defensive players, and forwards, very balanced. Now how about the second team? The second team can't get scored on since their opponent can't move. Therefore, they don't need to worry about defense, so their entire lineup are offensive players that can help score. I would argue that they are playing 2 different games. And so you see my point with Melissa being that, if the enemy doesn't get to attack you, you're focusing on the offensive side of the game, which is great, but you can ignore the defensive side of the game. In conclusion, I love Melissa. She is great for helping players clear endgame content quickly and more easily. However, I would love to see a trend where more players experiment with non-Melissa clears so we get to see more diverse team comps and strategies. And again, I never fault anyone for using Melissa. I think you might as well use everything in your power to fight all content in the game. Anyways, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.